Good news you can use with that Mahone, yeah. She got the good news you can use. Good news you can use for your life.
Hello and welcome again to this edition of the Boomer Beat. I am your host, Beverly Mahone, and March is Women's History Month, and I am using this platform to spotlight some of the women I believe are on the move and making a difference in the lives of others. And one of them just happens to be somebody I have known since childhood, which is just absolutely amazing. And I am so honored and pleased to welcome her to this episode today. Hello, should I say attorney Sarah? What? Hey Jeaneen, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me today.
Well, I was looking at LinkedIn. Oh, I guess it's probably been about a month ago now, and I saw that you had ventured off into being an entrepreneur by opening up a thrift shop, which, thrift shops aren't unique, but I don't think that I've ever heard of a Black woman owning a thrift shop. Now, maybe I'm sure they're out there. I mean, I know
Mhm.
they're out there, but I guess in my circle, I did not know. So, I first of all kind of like let our viewers know more about you. I know you're an attorney. I know you're a soror. I know that you're born and raised in Canton, Ohio. What else should we know about you?
Well, I'm a longtime friend of Beverly, and it was just great to reconnect. We grew up in the same neighborhood as children. I'm a native born Canton, Ohio, the Hall of Fame city. I've never actually left the city on a permanent basis, so I've been here the entire time. I did spend 1 year in Brazil, and that was many, many years ago. And then, of course, when I went away for college. But other than that, I've been here. Went to law school in Akron, Ohio, which is LeBron's home, 30 minutes up the street. And now I'm just in a position where I'm trying to give back a little bit. So yes, as you mentioned, I did attend law school. I am a proud member, to be a Delta girl of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the soror Bevs. And then I also do other community service things. I sit on the board of our local hospital and try to fit in where I can and be helpful.
Well, your family has such deep roots in Canton. So, I mean, I could see why, someone of your caliber would stay there. You know, my family didn't have those deep roots. So, I was just backed up and left. But okay, so that gives us the backdrop. Let me ask you, did you know in high school that you wanted to go to law school? At what point did you realize, this is the career path that I want to choose?
So from our area, we have icons, and there was an icon by the name of Robert Fisher, and he was the city service director for many, many years, an African American male. He is now deceased, but Mr. Fisher was really good friends with my father. And so he hired me to work in the summers in high school. And I told him that I actually wanted to be a psychologist. And he said, a psychologist? And I said, yes, that's what I'd like to do. And he said, well, you can't be a psychologist because you won't be able to get a job. And I don't know if that's true or false. I'm just explaining the story to you because I don't want to offend any psychologists out there. But he says, you won't be able to get a job, so you can't do that. And I said, but that's what I think I want to do. And he says, well, you can be a psychiatrist. He said, then you're going to have to go to med school. And I said, well, that I know I don't want to do. And so he said, did you ever think about law school? And I said, not really. I thought about becoming a judge at one point. So long story short, he pretty much encouraged me to take the legal route. And that's how, so it wasn't something I grew up dreaming about. It was something that he talked me into.
Wow. And I knew Mr. Fisher well.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, that's very surprising to learn that information. Oh, why did you choose the University of Akron?
Because I wanted to be around home, and it was affordable, and that way I could live at home. I actually ended up living with an aunt that lived in Akron, but I was trying to save money.
And was being a lawyer everything you thought it would be, or more, when you first started?
Different than what I thought. Again, it was never the practice of law that I was pursuing. At one point, I wanted to run for judge. So when I was in law school and when I graduated, I actually clerked and worked for some of the judges, and that changed my mind. Trust me, it changed my mind. So what happened to me is I opened a small private practice, worked on this practice for maybe 2 years, and then I was summoned by the Timken Company, which is another big company in this area, and I left that practice 30 years ago. So I never really got into it at that time. I then went to Timken. I retired from Timken Steel Corporation, which was a spinoff of the Timken Company. And so now, fast forward 30 years, and I thought, I got this law degree. I really should practice law. So it's really, while it's an old experience, it's a brand new experience. And then we have to talk about how the thrift store fits into that. But that's what happened.
Right. That's where I'm going. Okay, very good. Okay, so then how did the idea for the thrift store come to be? Because I recall, if I'm not mistaken, I recall seeing some blurb somewhere where it was just kind of like you selling items, and then all of a sudden there was a store, and I was like, okay, well, when did all this happen? So how did it develop?
Well, kind of funny. Here's what happened. When I retired from the Timken Company, and I actually retired 2 years earlier than anticipated, which was great. I mean, it was just great. But when I retired, I kind of drove around and got to know my city again. Because when I worked there, I worked really hard and there was no leisure time, so to speak. So I just sort of drove around the city, stopped in stores, enjoyed my day. And I became familiar only at that point with thrift stores. Prior to that, my thought of a thrift store was the Goodwill or, the Salvation Army. I didn't realize there were mom and pop thrift stores. So as I ventured around the area and stopped in these thrift stores, I fell in love with them. They had such unique items and the costs were good. And so I came home and told my husband, you know what, I want a thrift store. I think that would be fun. My husband is very practical. He's a financial person. So you can imagine what went through his head when I came home talking about thrift stores. And he then said, well, why would you open a thrift store when you have a law degree? Why don't you open a legal practice? And I was like, well, I kind of didn't want to do that, but to appease him, I found a spot for my thrift store and told him I found a great spot for the law office. So we go, we look, he liked the spot. And so I ended up doing both. I opened the thrift store in the front, and I have a small portion dedicated to my law office in the back. So I killed 2 birds with 1 stone.
That is just so clever. Oh my God. So which gets the more business, I guess? I'm wondering.
Actually, well, it's funny. They feed off of each other because in the thrift store, I have my business cards and people get a kick out of the story. But what ends up happening is they come into the thrift shop to buy whatever it is they're going to buy. And then they find out I'm an attorney and they say, well, do you do wills? I really need to get a will done. Yes, I do. So then they become clients. So they kind of feed off of each other. Then my clients, of course, come in. They have no idea I have a thrift store a lot of times. So they come in and they come to the shop and they walk in and they're like, what is this? And I said, oh, that's the store. Come on, we're going back to the office. Well, then they go back out and buy something from the store. So they sort of feed off of one another.
That is so clever. I don't think there's anyone in the United States doing this. I think I need to contact somebody and tell them. Oh my gosh. So tell me about how you developed the thrift store, because they are gently used items. I mean, did you have that many items that you could put in a thrift store, or did you start collecting from the community? How did that work?
Well, I have two semi-partners, and you may know them. Sandra Piles. Do you remember Sandra? Her nickname back in the day was Issy. You probably know Mike Piles and Speedy, her brothers. They were older. But anyway, she and her daughter are actually partners of mine. So among the three of us, we shop, we bring things from home, and we do not do consignments, but we do take donations. And that, that the store itself isn't huge. It's a quaint, cute little store. And so we're able to keep it stocked pretty easily.
And so what type of items do you sell at the thrift store?
Oh my, we just buy unique things and we bring unique things. And so there's no particular class of items. Today, when I was preparing for this, one of my partners called me because she's working, and she said, Jeaneen, those box things you have in the back with those colored box things in them, what are they? Because someone wanted to buy them. And what they are, I actually have one here. It's a plastic container that holds several small plastic containers that you put photographs in. So you can end up with 4,600 photographs in a little tiny tote case. And so that's one example. And you go from that to furniture. People come in and everybody loves, we have a lot of paintings and pictures and baskets and just a variety of things.
Wow, that is incredible. Now, where are you located? So, I mean, it's been so many years since I've been back home.
Yes.
Give me some idea of where you're located.
Okay, so the Hall of Fame is on Fulton Road.
Yes.
And we are on Fulton Road. The Hall of Fame is expanding to the Village. So if you remember where Triple A used to be on Fulton, it's directly across the street. Village Cleaners is there. And it's kind of a staple in the community. It's right on the main drag of Fulton Road, Northwest. And that's important, Bev, because I wanted a location. 44718 for our listeners is a zip code that's considered the better part of town. We don't live in that zip code.
Right. We don't. I didn't know any Black people that lived in that zip code.
Well, they do now. But anyway, that's a zip code that's the better part of town. And what I wanted to offer was a thrift store that has quality items in what's considered the better part of town for the community at large, regardless of your economic background, could come in and feel good about and leave with prices that make them happy. And I often post pictures of my customers, and they're Black, they're white, they're men, they're women, they're young, they're old. So, people come in and find what they love and they leave happy.
That's what I was going to ask you. How diverse was it for the thrift store? But you've already answered that question. As far as the pandemic goes, how was your business affected? The law practice and the thrift store?
Well, it was impacted because we were scheduled to open March of 2020, 2 weeks before everything shut down. And so it really impacted us. And then we ended up opening in July, although many things were still shut down and people weren't coming out. But we wanted to do a soft opening anyway so that we could learn. None of us had previous experience. So it was a way for us to get into it, understand what was going on with the thrift store. And we'd have sporadic customers here and there. But our business has been built on word of mouth. Because someone comes in, they're happy, they tell their friend or they bring their friend with them the next time. We get return customers, and then we get a lot of referrals. So what we see now with spring kind of breaking, we're seeing more activity. People want to get out. Many of the customers say, hey, I've never seen this before. How long have you been here? We did not advertise. We're going to try to do better. We started doing Facebook market advertising. And that has brought in a lot of people because our pickup spot is at the store. So they don't have to come to our homes or anything. And so that's brought a lot, but the pandemic has impacted it. And as far as my practice, not so much, because the people who need legal work need it, pandemic or not. Exactly. So it hasn't affected that as much, but it did impact the store.
So when you shared with your husband that this was your vision, the thrift store and the law practice all in one, what was his reaction, and how is he feeling about it now, Mr. Practicality?
Right.
I have one of those too.
It's so funny because what sold him was the space, because again, I'm saying names you may know. I don't know if you remember Stacy and Stephanie Barino.
Yes.
But okay, so prior to my taking over this spot, Stacy Barino had it, and she and her partners had really cleaned it up and made it very, very nice. And then she had a grandchild and said she didn't want any parts of anything that didn't have to do with her grandchild. So I was able to walk into an establishment that was very nicely done and very nicely crafted. So when my husband saw the spot, that helped immensely, because he's like, this is really nice. It's something you wouldn't expect when you walk in the door. So I showed him, well, this part will be the store and this part will be the office. And he said, let's see what happens. You know, we took a 2-year sort of venture. I'm just moving into year 2. And now this is how he describes me, as having a racket, he calls it. And he says he's going to call me Jeaneen Wheeling and Dealing McDaniels, because really, you know, people buy this stuff on Facebook Market, they come in the store, then they want to will. And so he's pretty comfortable with it now.
Do you do online sales, or are you strictly, you know, you walk through the door, you walk out?
Well, I do not ship. I'll put it like that. So I post things online, but it's a brick and mortar. And I like the brick and mortar. I don't want to get into shipping, although I've had so many requests that at some point I'm going to look into that, but not now. Not now. I like the small business brick and mortar, sort of have relationships with our customers, and we end up being friends. They end up being my friends. And my husband said, I'm a counselor. He said, you are using your desire to be a psychologist, because he said, you know, he comes and he'll be in the back sometimes. And he says, you really engage with your customers. And we do. We get into really good conversations. I love it. I love it.
How many, what percentage of your clientele would you say are people that you knew growing up?
Very little.
Okay.
I meet new people. These are new people that I didn't know. Maybe the people who grew up with me, or I know from the community, you know, they make a stop in now and then. Some people are recurring people, but they come in and they feel like they've supported because they have come in, or they'll donate. But these are mostly new people. They're it's interesting because the Republican headquarters is right next door. And so many people, especially during the election, thought they were going into the Republican headquarters, and they were actually coming into the store. And, you know, we're Deltas, there's lots of elephants there. And so they're like, wow, I love these elephants. So, you know, I got a lot of business from the Republican headquarters. And, you know, we made friends with these people.
Not for that purpose.
Right. Exactly. It's a Delta thing. But what I have found is that people genuinely are nice. People are nice. They have good hearts. We had different, and the people who came in from the Republican headquarters, we would talk about it. We have different philosophies, different thoughts, but they're still nice people. For instance, one elderly Caucasian male walked in one day, and I asked him, had he ever been to the store? And he said no. And I asked him if he'd like a little tour. And he said, I'd love that. So I ended up touring him, took him back, showed him where my law offices were. And then when I got finished, I said, do you have any questions? He said, well, he said, I've got to tell you, I actually thought I was going to the Republican headquarters. So we both kind of chuckled about that. And I said, well, I was a little suspicious of that, but when you said you wanted the tour, that's fine. And then this is the funny part. He says to me, he says, you know, he says, I don't know what your political beliefs are. He said, but here's the thing for me. He said, I am just so sick of all the lies. And I told him, I said, you know what? So am I. And I said, however, we're not going to discuss what the lies are. We're just going to keep it at a high level and agree that we're both tired of all the lies. And he and I shook hands during this pandemic, which I usually don't do, but we shook hands, and now he stops by to check on me. So he's my buddy now.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
And
that's what I mean by I love it.
And I think you're right about that. I think that if you meet people one-on-one, generally, people are just nice people. It's all the other stuff. But anyway,
Right.
okay. So as we get ready to wrap up here, let me ask you, what advice do you have for anyone? I was going to say specifically women, but let's just say anyone who's, maybe they're close to retirement or they are in retirement and they're thinking about venturing out and creating a business. What kinds of things do they need to really be mindful of from a legal standpoint?
Okay, well, you need to know the rules in your community. For instance, my location is in Plain Township. And what I found is that no one has, your small business associations may, but your townships and your cities don't have a checklist. And how you find out things is by sheer luck in my case. I did ask, I said, hey, what do I need to do? Where's my vendor's license? What do I need to do? So while they told me some things, I was in the store one day and here comes the fire marshal or one of his representatives. And he's like, okay, I'm here to check on your fire stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, you got to do this and that, but they're very nice. And he says, what happens is we find out about these new businesses. We stop in, we tell you what you need, and then we come back in 35 days to see if you did it. So so that's something I learned on the fly. No one had told me that. But I would say check out your local city or township, wherever you live. What are their rules? What kind of signage can you have? What are the rules for square footage? So that's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to determine what kind of business you want to be. I am legal limited corporations, or LLC, most people know it by. And I chose that for tax reasons and all kinds of reasons. But when you start your business, you have to figure out what you want your business entity to be, whether if it's the sole proprietorship, an LLC, a corporation, and you need an attorney to help you think through those things. So that's the second thing. Be ready for taxes, have an accountant on board, and then be prepared to spend and perhaps not make money the first, I said 3 years. I've been pleased with the fact that I haven't really advertised the amount of money I've been able to make off of secondhand items. So it's actually been a pleasant surprise, but I went into it prepared to not make any money for the first 3 years. And just because you don't doesn't mean you're not successful. Some people start out with a boom, some people build. It just depends on what the business is. And so I would say be prepared to spend the money you need to spend to get the returns that eventually you hope to get, but don't use all your retirement on a hope and a dream. Be prepared to lose, be prepared to use money that you can afford to lose hopefully you've saved if you're retired or you have a pension or something, or, you have your Social Security, but be prepared to live without that money. That should be external money that you're not, surviving on. And that's how you start. Read. I read about thrift stores. I asked people. I went to Goodwill. I asked them what kind of systems they use. And as I said, I was not an expert in that area. I've learned as I've gone. It hasn't been that difficult. And then as far as the legal, I decided to keep it very, very limited because I don't want to learn more than I already knew. I want to stay in an area that I'm comfortable with and that I can provide good legal advice. And so know your business. Don't try to reach out too far in the beginning. Take baby steps. That would be my recommendation.
Good advice. Good, solid advice. And listen, folks, y'all got all this for free, okay? Because I know she would charge you if you walked into her office, okay? Let me ask you this. Do you think brick and mortar businesses are no longer going to exist in the not too distant future, or do you think that there will still be a place for them?
I think there's a place for them because there are certain people who want to touch, feel, and see. And you don't get to touch, you don't get to feel it online. You can see it, but when people come in, they're just excited to look around and see all the different things we have. I mean, from salt and pepper shakers to, like I said, furniture, they're just excited because they actually get to lift it up and look at it and say how cute it is. And so I think there's a place for brick and mortar. I think there's a people who want to walk into a store.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And I'll also, let me just, before I forget, I want to thank you for including me in a book that you worked on. You were the author or the co-author?
It was my mother.
Your mother.
My mother wrote the book.
Okay, your mother is one and the same. Okay. That's just okay. It's just one and the same. All right. And because I was not aware of the number of celebrities' talent that came from our little hometown. I was not aware, and I was so shocked, and I was like, wow. And I felt like I'm in this group of people. So thank you for including. Tell your mother I said thank you for including me. And
I will.
I understand that birthday. Did we have a birthday yet?
I will on Monday.
Okay, so you will have a birthday on Monday. So I'm going to say happy birthday in advance.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This will be airing by then. So I was going to sing happy birthday to you, but I will not.
That's
all
funny.
Right, darling. Okay, well, that's it. That's going to do it for this edition of the Boomer Beat. Jeaneen, thank you so much.
Well, again, thank you. This was fun.
This was so much fun. And hopefully when I get back to Canton, whenever that will be, I am definitely coming to the thrift store. I'm definitely coming. So I will be there. I don't know if I'll need legal advice. I might need that too, coming back home. I may need a 2-for-1, twofer.
Okay.
All right, everyone. That's going to do it for this edition of the
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember this, stay empowered along your journey. See ya.
Bye. Thank you.
Good news you can use for your life. If you want to get the info that'll help you throughout your life. Yeah.